when I said I think I do actually have this thing, one of my friends who didn't quite understand it just sort of like moved a pencil out of the way and then was like waiting for me to move it, and I was like, it's not that, like, and it's frustrating because it's not, I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the social expectation of what OCD actually is through like everything. I did have a nighttime routine similar to you, but what happened is I kept adding things onto it, and it got to the point where I was literally up at 2 a.m. doing these things, and I sat literally, I was doing it for so long, and that's not healthy. I had to just look at myself and say, like, I need to stop this.
Hello and welcome back to the Talking Head podcast. This is episode 4. Welcome back if you have joined us previously. If not, welcome. This is a podcast where we talk about mental health awareness and the different issues that surround it. This week is all about OCD. This week, I'm going to be joined by Jess, who has had experiences with OCD, as well as myself. So yeah, if you just want to give a quick introduction as to who you are and what kind of place you're in at the moment.
Hi, I'm Jess. I currently live in Kent, but I'm looking to move to Farnham soon. I've had OCD pretty much since I was about 3, with varying levels of intensity. I've sort of learnt to deal with it in various different ways, but yeah, it's been something that's been a part of my life for a long, long time.
It's a very, very difficult thing to kind of totally just, you can't, I don't think, in my opinion, a lot of people say you can recover from it, but I don't think we can. At least from my own experiences, I don't think it will ever really go away. And that's sort of one of the issues that I do want to go into. But before we do go into that, I would just like to cover, which is going to be a new section of each podcast. So we're going to open the podcast with us talking, so me talking and the guest talking about a positive that has lit up their week. So Jess, if you want to go and take the floor on that one and just tell me something that's lit up your week.
Sure, okay. So I was looking for accommodation in the area I'm about to move to, and I got a little bit worried that I might not have been able to find a place that was suitable. However, the thing that has lit up my week this week is that I did actually find a place, and I've secured it now, so that's that worry over.
Yeah, I mean that's always, going to play on your mind. Mine luckily has been sorted, and I was quite apprehensive because I was thinking the entire time, I was like, what happens if like I do get thrown into that situation where I've got to try and find something? But it's worked out in the end, and it seems like everybody's seems to know where they're going. I should mention that me and Jess are all both going to the same uni come October, so yeah, that should be quite exciting. But my kind of thing that's lit up my week is I follow an artist called Alfie Templeman. They haven't actually released their debut album or anything yet. And honestly, he's class, and I'd recommend him. And he's just released his new EP, which I do want to get right. So I have actually brought it up onto my screen. It is called Happiness in Liquid Form. And yeah, there are some bangers on there, and it's got me through the week, to be honest. So yeah, that's good, and I'd recommend that. Okay, so now going into OCD, I just want to go and talk about your first experiences with OCD and the moment that you kind of acknowledged that what you had was OCD. Because there's a moment, especially because you mentioned when you were young that you were suffering from it. I suppose there was a time when you didn't really know what it was, and then there was a time when you got told what it was. Yeah, just tell me all about that.
Okay, so it's kind of it's different because there's different stages of my knowledge of OCD. So it started off with when I was younger, just having no idea what it was, but I now know that I did have it then. So when I was really young, it was because I was a kid that had a very prolific imagination, it turned into monsters inside my head that would like tell me what to do, and if I didn't do them, then all sorts of things would happen, which now when you see it that is exactly what OCD actually is. But then it got worse as I got older. More things would happen, and I think the moment for me where I realized it was OCD was when I realized it was a problem, because I've been living with it for such a long time and ignoring it or thinking it was just a thing that no one was noticing. But as soon as I realized that it was a problem, that something that actually was affecting my day, that's when I realized it was OCD.
Yeah, I suffered from it probably since I was about, I'd say 7, because that's about the time I moved to the house where I'm living now. It comes in weird forms, and it's ever evolving. For me at least, it's from when I first started. There are some things that have actually remained with me. There are certain things that kind of just completely disappear, and then there are new things, and it's so strange how it works. But I do think it sort of revolves around the idea of consequence. So if you don't do a certain thing, if something doesn't happen, then this thing will happen, and usually that thing is bad, and obviously that kind of puts a worry into your head. So can you go into detail about your first experiences of OCD and what sort of things that you were doing, and then when did, and I assume it was your parents or a friend or whatever, sort of acknowledged that and was like, okay, let's talk about this?
Yeah, so the thing with OCD is a lot of the stuff that you end up doing is so dumb looking to normal people who don't have the sort of like same. So I say normal people, but people without OCD. So I was very much into even numbers. I stuck to even numbers. It was just that was my thing. I hated, like a lot of people find the number 13 really superstitious. I couldn't go near it, to the point where like it would be when I was younger, I'd start crying if anything was to do with 13 whatsoever at all, which obviously isn't the reaction that most people have to superstition. But sort of touching certain things a certain amount of times, I would do that a lot. I would have to touch the doorknob before I left like 14 times or something like that. And if I messed it up, like if someone talked to me while it was happening, I would do it again. And it would just get to the point where it just ramped up and up and up. So it would be it would go to 4 to 8 to, it would go up, and normally it would just be like, if you touch the doorknob 4 times, you can kind of get away with that. But if you're standing in the way of someone trying to get through to the door, and you're like, wait, just trying to touch the door, that's when it starts to notice. I think it wasn't really my parents that picked up on it, more than there was a friend that I had who had really struggled with OCD when she was younger, and had sort of learnt to deal with it. I'd gone through all of that, and I was talking about, I think I was doing something, and she noticed that I was stepping on the floor. You know how sometimes with pavements there's like different bits that have been fixed. I was stepping on a couple of them and then going back and re-stepping on them again.
Right.
And she was like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I don't really know how to explain it, but it's this, that, and the other. And then she was like, I know exactly what that is. And it sort of explained it to me. But yeah, that was sort of when I realized what it was.
Yeah, it's the thing is with sort of when people acknowledge it, it's such a, I mean, I do want to kind of go into the stigma around OCD, because for a lot of people when they think of OCD, and this pisses me off more than anything, is when people go, oh, you're just tidy, you're just a clean freak. And I'm like, there is so much more to it. And honestly, I reckon, I don't want to say, it's one of the worst things that you can have, but it's definitely one of the most troubling and hard to get rid of in terms of mental illnesses, because it's something that plays on your mind, I would say 24/7.
Yeah.
I do think it's important that we go into the sort of details into what your OCD kind of became. So if we talk about all the specific things that you do, I reckon there's a few people that would listen to this and then go, "Oh, I do that too." So I think
Yeah,
if we talk about that a lot more and kind of just talk about, you know, because I reckon there's sort of, I mean, I don't know what your sense of humor is, you know, but there's sort of a level of humor, and you can kind of laugh at some of the things you've done because they are stupid. But it would also be great for people to kind of listen to it and go,
yeah,
"Oh, I do that too." So I'll just kick off with saying when I first started running into OCD, it sort of plays into what I want to do as a career, which is filmmaking. And this is going to sound really bizarre, but you know, I'm an open book, so I don't really mind. When I was younger, you know, I think like most kids, I would play with toys and teddies and whatever, and I
yeah.
would always imagine that my eyes were like the camera. So
Right.
I would basically film them like they were actors, and I could manipulate them and do whatever. And I would like make little episodes. And I remember, and this was probably when I was, I don't know, I must have been like 5 or 7 or whatever. Um, I would say to myself, usually in like quite a quiet voice, so that nobody else would ever like hear. So I was quite self-conscious at an early age. I would just go, action, and then like end episode or roll credits or whatever.
Yeah,
Probably not roll credits. I didn't know what that meant by then, but I just remember saying like end or whatever, and I'd have to say it a certain amount of times to make sure that the camera was recording,
yeah,
which is weird. It
yeah.
doesn't make any sense, but that was like my first sort of encounter with OCD, and then it started like getting worse when I kind of became obsessed about switching off a bathroom light. So
Right.
it was no other light apart from the one which is nearest my bedroom. And I remember I would be going to bed and I'd have to check that the light was off. And I'd have to tell myself the light was off in like a really
Yeah,
quiet voice. I'd go, right, the light's off, the light's off, the light's off, lights off, lights off, lights off, lights off, lights off. And
yeah.
it's like, even though the light is off right in front of me,
You can see it. Yeah,
yeah, I would be like, no, the light's off, the light's off. And eventually I'd do it and I'd go back in bed and be like, is it off? Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's so stupid. It
Without, yeah,
doesn't make any sense. And what would have been the consequence of that light being on? I mean, you know, what? God forbid it being on all night. I mean, what? It would have just meant, you know, a few more pounds or whatever that would have been
yeah,
spent on the electricity bill. That's it. Like,
yeah,
I was just so self-conscious about it, and then that kind of developed into the tap being on.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I had a tap one. Yeah,
yeah, the tap one is, I think, quite common. And the way I'd check is I wouldn't say the tap is off. I'd like put my hand underneath the tap, and I still do
yeah,
it now. Sometimes it's like just to check. Yeah, and it's weird. It's like a self-conscious thing. You just kind of go, okay, oh, it's off. And
yeah,
it's so stupid. Um, and yeah, that was kind of where my parents kind of, I think they must have seen me doing it, and they were like, okay, like we need to talk about it. And I remember it was one night I got basically talked to a doctor about it. And it might have been an emergency appointment. I don't think it was, but I feel like it could have been. Because at that point it was getting quite severe. And that night I remember the doctor saying like, and I think I was at primary school at this time, saying like, you know, OCD is really common. It's common in 1 to 100 people, I think it was. And at primary school, at least at my primary school, there was about 200 people. So I assumed that I wouldn't be alone. Do you know what I mean? So it made me feel
yeah,
better that
yeah,
there was 2 in 200 people that could have had it. I mean, that could have,
yeah.
you know, been a lot more, but it made me feel a lot less weird when
Mm,
I was kind of doing it. And I remember sort of some of the therapy they recommended was to draw the OCD as like a monster or whatever, that you could kind of, once you create an image of what it is, then you can sort of beat it. And that was what they gave me as a child. And obviously that isn't something that I can take much relevancy to now, but yeah, it kind of got more severe from there, and took many different forms, as OCD usually does. If you want to talk about some of your experiences and sort of the most ridiculous things you've done, but also some of the things that have been more severe than others.
yeah. Well, I've had my fair share of ridiculous ones, I will admit. One of which was, so I did have quite a big obsession with, like I was saying before, the pavement, where some certain squares of the pavement have been fixed. And when I would walk down the road to my bus stop every morning, I would obviously go and walk on every single thing, and I would have to walk on single thing with both my feet. So you can imagine that if there's like 3 together, it looks very odd with me just like stepping one after the other. And it would get to the point where I would doubt myself, like you said, you sort of doubt yourself, and I had to go back up the road and do it again. So it would end up like I would leave this. It takes me about 5 minutes to get down to the bus now, but before it would take me like 20 minutes if it was a bad day. So I'd have to leave like half an hour to get to the bus that takes 5 minutes down the road. Like, it's really bad. But the reason I stopped that one was because my boss, who for my work, their parents live on my road, and I would walk past, and there was a specific bit where there were like a very awkward amount, and I would do it down the road, and their parents talked to the boss, and then my boss talked to me and was like, why do you like do that weird dance thing down the road? Like, it looks like you're dancing. And I was like, it, because I didn't know how to explain it. I was like, oh, I've done it since I was little, I don't really know. And then I thought, that's the realization of, oh my God. But then it's so difficult because you've got one side of you being like, right, you really need to stop that now, but you've got the other side, which is the OCD, like, but if you stop it, this and what, you know, all the consequences. So, you know, it's one of those things. But it was just ridiculous because obviously it looked like I was just dancing down the road, and there were people who would walk down the road every day alongside me and just look at me like, you're actually that weirdo girl that walks down the road, like, like, what are you doing? Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a for me, there was always this sort of, because I was always like quite self-conscious about it. It was worse when I was alone because nobody else was watching, and that's when it takes some more severe turns. So I found that certain things, and you know, having people in the room, or whatever, would just stop me from doing it, and it was sort of a relief. Like, that could kind of take the worries away. Like, those worries would sort of still be there, but I would kind of be distracted from it, and I wouldn't want to almost embarrass myself. I mean, for me, I had this weird thing, and I still sort of have it now, where I would have this like nighttime routine, because with OCD, it's very easy to kind of work yourself into this sort of routine. And every night before I go to bed, I'd have to like do something a certain amount of times, like take a certain amount of sips of water before I went to bed, or you know, stupid stuff like roll over in my bed a certain amount of times. I don't do that anymore, but like, it's so weird how I used to do stuff like that. And I mean, when we talk about consequences, which is what I want to go into, is for me, the consequence was always that I'm gonna pass away in my sleep.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, if I passed away in my sleep, that would just, I mean, obviously it's a terrifying thought and you don't want to think about it, especially when you're young. But I knew somebody that actually did do that. And so that, as soon as that image was put in my head, it then, you know, played on me and made me really kind of worry about the fact that it could actually happen to me. And so, yeah, the consequence for me was always death, or somebody else is going to die. And that was always, you know, not the nicest thing. And I thought, what's the harm in me doing 5 more sips of water if it means that everybody else can live? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I thought, you know, for the sake of that, you know, I thought, well, I might as well just do it. And the weird thing is, when you total up the amount of time you've probably spent doing all these stupid things, it does add up. Do you know what I mean? And you think it's only going to be, you know, 10 seconds. Who cares? And then all of a sudden you then total it all up, and it's been going on for years. And you think, Jesus, that's probably days that I've wasted,
rolling
just doing
around in your bed. Yeah.
stupid shit like that. I mean, I don't know what consequence it was ever for you. What did you ever
Yeah.
think would happen?
Well, it was pretty similar. It was either something happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
or so like either failure, because I mean everyone is scared to fail, but that was like sort of my thing. But also alongside that was like the death of my family, or something happening to us health wise, that I think my brain was just like, yeah, well, I think the world's just going to go to shit if you don't do this. So that was that was the way that it ended up happening. And the funny thing is that now I'm better with it. It's still there, like you said. I don't think it ever really goes. But the reason it's got better is because a couple of bad things have happened in my life, and I think that's highlighted the fact that I've been doing all this stuff, but bad shit still happens anyway. And I think because it was so broad for me, it wasn't just like, you are going to this specific thing's going to happen to you. It was just like, your life's going to go to shit. The fact that something bad happened anyway kind of made me force the habit out, because I was like, okay, shit's going to happen. And that's kind of, I mean, it's not the best way to get out of the habit, but
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think sort of the recovery is, and it's very difficult to do this, is sometimes you've just got to kind of take a stand and go, right, I'm not going to do that, and see if anything happens. And as soon as you do that and nothing happens, it's still in your head, because you think, well, it's only been a day, could have been a fluke. Do you know what I mean? But it definitely, it helps just being able to know that nothing actually did happen. And that's sort of the way I've recovered from certain things. There had one weird phase where I was obsessed with thanking people.
Yeah.
So this is a really obscure anecdote, but I think it's quite funny. I was in, I believe, France at the time, and it was a time when, do you remember the app Cookie Clicker?
Yes. Yeah.
Where you just click the phone
Pick the
and
same,
and it would just be like, that's the entire purpose of the game. Well, I was hooked on that over that holiday, and I was on holiday with family friends, and I remember the family friend father just seeing the app and then just tapping it, or like for a while, and he got my cookies up. Well, fair enough, like, I'm gonna take that. And I remember that the entire time it played on me that I didn't actually thank him for doing that.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, oh god, I haven't thanked him for that. So I think the next day we were in like Paris or whatever, and we were on the coach back, and I was like, oh, by the way, thank you for doing that for me, getting me some extra cookies yesterday. And like, that is such a weird thing to do. And I think he was just like, all right, okay, and fair enough, because that is a bit weird. But yeah, I mean, there was that, and sort of, I didn't want to say thank you as much, because I realized the more times I say thank you, people are going to pick up on it. So I'd come up with like different ways of saying thank you, like, oh, cheers, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I just kind of spice it up a bit so that people wouldn't notice. It's sort of always that idea that you don't want to be noticed doing it, because it's sort of is embarrassing. Have you encountered that, at all, where you've kind of restricted doing something because other people are there, or you don't want to seem basically weird?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that I did, so like you, a lot of the bulk of the OCD was done behind closed doors, because you didn't really want people to see or anything like that. I once I'd finished doing the walking, like when I was walking down the road every day, and once I'd found out that someone knew and they were looking, I tried to cover it up and like tie my shoe and like stand there and like try and play it off like I wasn't doing it, when clearly they knew I was doing it. So it just like looks even worse. But it is like covering it up. Like, there was a couple of times where I had stuff, like I had quite a obsession with the whole like saying I love you to my family members. So because I would have this thing that I would want to say the last I love you before I go like
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
or
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
just in case that like they died, or I died, and then
Yeah,
I
and
didn't
then
get
you
to say the last I
you
love you.
didn't get to
Yeah,
say that. Yeah.
but
Um,
obviously if they keep saying it back and forth like multiple times, you then end up looking like you're just like love you, bye, and then shutting the door really
yeah,
quickly.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, just to talk about more obscure examples, because I think people will find this funny. I went through a phase as well. This is disgusting. It's not. It's not actually that disgusting. It's sort of. It's mildly disgusting. So a bit of a discretion warning. Um. So no, I don't think it's that bad. So I pick my fingernails all the time as a kid.
right, yeah,
Like, I think a lot of kids do that. And I must have had like a lecture, I say lecture, whatever, like a talk at primary school, and they were like, "Oh yeah, like littering's bad and stuff like that." I
yeah.
realised all of a sudden I was dropping on my fingernails on the floor, and
Oh,
and that was littering, and I thought, Jesus Christ! And it wouldn't be so bad if I didn't have this image in my head that they could trace my fingernails back to the person who had littered them,
yeah,
and they'd go, then they'd say, "Oh God, it's Taylor Caddick. He's dropped his fingernails again. Gonna have to knock at his house and arrest him and stuff like that." And it always played in my head. And so I remember I was at a birthday meal once, and I was and I realized, and I was like, "Oh God!" And we had to move from the bar to the to like the table, and I was like, "Oh shit, I need to fucking get my fingernails." And I was like,
oh, yeah,
and then my mom was like, "Come on, you need to go." And I left it. And then as soon as like that passed, and then I realized that nothing bad was happening, and I didn't get arrested, I was all right.
yeah,
And it's so weird. It just is. There's so many weird ways it takes forms. And yeah, I mean, talking about recovery, when you stop doing stuff, things get easier. Um, and we were talking about, when people notice what you're doing, you don't do it. I was in a relationship for just under 2 years, um, where in the past, and I don't remember doing any sort of OCD around them, which is weird because I didn't want. I
yeah,
did. See, I know I didn't do it because I didn't want to be judged.
yeah,
And it definitely helped. And then coming out of that
mm,
relationship, it was difficult because then you're more alone, and then you kind of slip back into old habits, and then
mm,
it becomes unhealthy, and then you feel like, and it's bad for that level because then you feel like to be okay and to be fine, you need to be back in that relationship, and then it plays into different things. And
yeah,
obviously I didn't need to go back in that relationship because you can deal with it by yourself. You don't need somebody to sort yourself out. Sorting yourself out is sort of up to yourself. That first sort of when you discover that what you have is, the treatment starts with you and what you do. No one else is going to be able to really sort you out, because as with most mental illnesses, it's tough because you're on you're on your own quite a lot, and you're left to deal with it on your own, and that's why it is so difficult. um and yeah, it's so bizarre. We can talk about that stigma of OCD.
mm,
So I assume that you've told people you have OCD. um
yeah.
how many times does it get mentioned? Oh, so you're just a tidy clean freak then?
Yeah, I mean that comes a lot with it, pretty much every time I mention it. It's always
Mm.
a, oh, okay, or they'll do a thing like they'll turn one of the switches on, like, oh, and they'll wait for me. Like, I remember one of my friends, when I said I think I do actually have this thing, one of my friends who didn't quite understand it just sort of like moved a pencil out of the way and then was like waiting for me to move it, and I was like,
Mm.
it's not that, like, and it's frustrating because it's not, I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the social expectation of what OCD actually is through like everything. Like, you see stupid Facebook ads being like, do you have OCD? Well, play this game, like it's really satisfying. And like
Yeah.
there's a weird connection between that sort of thing that I think got like sort of helps that stigma in a way.
Mm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of sort of miseducation about what OCD is. it isn't helped by they're dire, like Channel 5 programs that talk about, extreme OCD, and it's just all cleaning. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there is so much more to it than that. And I understand it probably doesn't make that good telly if you're recording. I mean, it's not good telly anyway, but it's less entertaining watching someone do something a certain amount of times. So I get that, but there is a lot more that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I think it does start actually with the sort of education system, which is what the next podcast is about. So that's a nice link into that next podcast. But there's so much more to be taught about. As I said in a previous podcast, which will now be out by the time this is out. In school, we're taught about rocks and corrosion in geography, but we're never taught about all these, mental illnesses and stuff like that. Instead, I really don't understand. It just angers me how we can be taught that, but then not something which I think is a lot more important.
Yeah.
Has there been any moments in your kind of experiences of OCD where you've noticed that it's got like very, very severe, and you've told yourself, I need to do something about this?
Yeah. So there was one particular thing. So I did have a nighttime routine similar to you.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is I kept adding things onto it. So it'd be
Yeah.
more and then more and then more. And then it
Yeah,
got to the
yeah.
point where I was literally up at 2 a.m. doing these things. And
Wow.
I sat, literally I was doing it for so long, and that's not healthy. And
No.
thing is, I looked at myself and I thought, Jesus Christ, it's 2 a.m. Like, you don't realize just how much time has passed until I was doing nothing else. I was doing all of the stuff that I told myself I needed to do. And I had to just look at myself and say, like, I need to stop this. And so slowly, after a long period of time, it's such a slow process to get yourself out of the habit, because you psych yourself up for it and then you just can't do it. So
Yeah.
because it's such a long routine, I would take bits and try and work on those and get those out of the way. So I'd try and be like, okay, so if I just skip that one or only do it this amount of times, then we'll see how that goes. And because it was like a massively long routine, it took like months to get it down to like a good thing where it wasn't disrupting my entire night. But yeah, that was when I realized it was a big problem.
Yeah, it takes sometimes the extremities for you to really sort of acknowledge the problem, because when it isn't a big issue, you don't really think about it. You don't really feel the need to sort it out, as with most things. But yeah, it is one of these things you only really realize you need to sort of end as soon as it gets really severe. And
Yeah.
that's sort of the sadness of it, because you've got to be in those dark times where you've got to do all this stuff for you to kind of get better and acknowledge it, because you've got to be bad to get better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a tough time, and that's why I started the podcast. I want people to know that they aren't alone and that they can talk to people. I mean, in my own experiences, talking about it has made me feel better. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, quite a few times, like, one of my OCD things was don't talk about it, because if I mentioned it, then my brain would be like, well, this is it now. Like, you've exposed this, and now it doesn't work anymore. So it means that what you were doing doesn't help your family anymore, as in like, but you still have to do it, but it just doesn't do what it's supposed to. So that was a struggle for a while. The reason I started to open up about it was when I talked to my friend who had it, because talking to her was easier, and then because of that, I'm now more open in general about talking about it. Like, this time 2 years ago, I would not have been even considering doing this, because it just would not have been my mentality, and so many things would have stopped that. But I do think talking about it is such a good way to get it out, because it almost does stop it airs out just how ridiculous it is. It also airs out how it's affecting your life. It's just not I think it just highlights to you just how detrimental it actually is, and then that makes you consider maybe stopping it or trying to reduce it.
Yeah. Definitely. It's a long road for most people, and it's a road that probably doesn't really have a distinct ending, and that's sort of the major issue with it is that I mean I said earlier about we should sort out different ways of therapy and more education on the matter. But personally, I don't know where to start with that. I mean, there probably is a route we could go down, but it's difficult to try and treat something that doesn't have 100% curability. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be something that you can just you say something and then all of a sudden they're going to go, oh yeah, shit, that's stupid, I'm never going to do that again, because it doesn't work like that. It's something that really does just play on your mind 24/7. I'd like to ask you a final question, if that's all right. Just obviously, I imagine now you're in a much stronger and better place. It'd be great if you could just sort of let people know what the best avenues are for dealing the issue, and how you are now and presently.
Yeah, okay, so I am a lot better than I was. It's still a thing, like we've said this whole time, it is going to be a thing, and it will always, I feel like if you do have OCD, like, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it's probably always going to be there, because it does play on your mind all the time. But it's worth knowing, it's worth knowing that you can reduce it down to the point where it's not actually playing a massive part in your life. I did a lot of work with myself, so I think if I was going to go from where I was before now, I think what would have helped more is that I talked to a professional. I didn't actually ever talk to a professional. I talked to friends and I talked to my family, and I did a lot of it on my own back, which I am proud that I did. However, I think it would have been a lot more a lot easier to do had I talked to someone that like knew what they were talking about and all sorts. I think, yeah, talk to people, anyone, even if you can't talk to a professional, talk to people. It's so important, just unbelievably so. Try and find loopholes. This is one of the biggest things for me. So obviously in my opinion, or in my case, the thing that was making me do the things was like, oh, you will die, or your family will die, or something like that. So what I did was turned it around on myself and said, okay, if you do this, you will die. So I will switch it out on myself. So then I've got this weird balance where I'm like, okay, so what does my body want to do? And if I push it hard enough, I'll stop doing it, because I've switched it round like backwards. So then I won't do that anymore. And then I realize actually it's not that bad. And then you start to learn how to deal with it more, and then it just goes, and that one goes. And chip it off a little bit at a time. People seem to have this weird thing where they think that they can, like, I've had someone say to me before, but just don't do it. But it's not that simple. So chip it off a little bit at a time, like every day if you can, every week if you need to. But if you can get it down to a very small manageable thing, that's the best thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said, I do agree with. It's funny, on all these final questions I usually ask, I'm usually left kind of speechless, because in that like last moment of like gasp, everybody seems to just kind of let everything go and everything, and I'm like, I don't really know what to say. But I on 100% I agree with you with what you were saying. While you were saying all that, I just wanted to just kind of get a statistic up, just so that people do know that they aren't alone. So earlier on, I used a statistic that 1 in 100 people face OCD. that's accurate to children. So when I got diagnosed with it, obviously it was accurate then. And this is a US figure, but I imagine it's quite universal. 1 in 40 adults do face OCD, so it's a very, very common issue. I mean, when you think about it, if 1 in 40 people have it, that's a lot of people that are not talking about it, because there's I mean, I don't really know many people that have come to me about it and said, yes, so this is what I have. And I would like to think that I know more than, well, if I'm one of the 40, then I would say I'd know, another 79 others. Do you know what I mean? So it's surprising how, little you kind of hear about it, and it just does come down to kind of admitting it. And like you said, a good way of dealing with it is reversing those consequences. So if you do something, reverse it. And that's what I used for quite a few things, and it does help. And chip it off. Again, chip it off. I'm just repeating your points because they were class.
Good,
But no, definitely. I think that's a really nice place to end it. I think it's been a really interesting conversation today, and I think there'll be a lot of people that can sort of listen to this and go, and then look at themselves and then go, oh, I sort of do things like that, or I do the same thing. OCD takes so many different forms, and that's why it's sort of difficult to sometimes diagnose and also deal with, because with certain illnesses there are certain symptoms that you can expect, but with something like this, it's very random and it's very particular to a certain person. But all that's important is to know that you aren't alone and that you can deal with it. So before we do go, do you have anything you want to plug or anything like that, or
I don't think I
shout
do.
out, or you don't have
No,
anything?
I think
That is new to the podcast.
It's the first.
Yeah, that's the first. I mean, I remember in the first one, Gabe he interrupted me to try and get his Instagram in. So fair enough. I don't know if it's worked any wonders for him yet, but we'll see. Anyway, that is the end of today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see you in the next one, which will most likely be about education and bullying within the education system. But until then, it's been great to have you here and listening. And tell friends and get people talking. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Nice. I was about to end the call instead of stop video. Just that was it.
I'm done now. Bye. Yeah.
Yeah.